Hey guys, today I'm going to talk about the Steyr GB. This is one of the most wondrous of the Wonder 9s of the early era because it holds 18 rounds, which was the most rounds in any semi-auto handgun at the time when it came out, which was, in a way, it was in the early 70s. What happened with these guns is kind of interesting, the history on them. In the 1970s, there was a Steyr importer named LES Incorporated in Illinois, and they received blueprints to these guns, the manufacturing details and everything, before Steyr actually got around to producing them themselves. So this LES Incorporated kind of jumped the gun a bit, and details are kind of hazy on this as to whether they got permission or not, but they started producing them on their own, and they called them the Rogak P18. Unfortunately for Steyr, Rogak was just not very skilled at producing these things. They didn't have the technical expertise. They made the guns completely unreliable. The way this gun works is on a gas delayed action, and what that means is that there's a little hole at the top of the barrel about right here. And as the bullet is escaping, gas comes up through that hole and it prevents the slide from going back. But like I said, Rogak, or LES Incorporated, just wasn't good enough at making guns that this fine mechanism, they couldn't get the timing right and everything, so half the time the guns just plain didn't work, and that way it would become a straight blowback gun, which is obviously not pleasant to shoot in 9mm. Lots of problems, feeding problems. They were just pieces of junk, basically. So eventually in 1980, Steyr came in and put a stop to that. They took over and started making these themselves. Steyrs were actually much better made. They're a solid company with a good reputation. They're based in Austria. There were 3 variations that they produced during the 80s, during the time when Steyr actually made these. This one is a commercial model, which you can tell because it's black. It's got this crinkle finish on it, which is kind of hard to see, but it's a little bit similar to sort of like a rhino coating that people put on their pickup truck beds, like a truck liner. It's a lot smoother than that, though. And it kind of has an interesting weave pattern to it. But so this is a commercial version. There were 2 commercial versions, and then also a military version, which was Parkerized with sort of a green phosphate finish. And the 2 versions of the commercial ones were, there was one with a rounded hammer, and then the later ones had this spurred hammer. And the spurred ones were apparently the best overall because they were the latest guns. They had the best triggers, best build quality, all of that. Steyr only ended up making about 20,000 of these. They never sold amazingly. Apparently they sold pretty well, at a pretty decent pace up until the mid-80s, but then Steyr decided they needed to up the price because they just weren't making enough money on them. Their #1 importer, which was Gun South, whose importer mark is usually found on the top of the gun there. It's actually pretty subtle, you don't usually see it, but they said, you know what, nobody's going to buy them at this increased price. You should probably just pull the thing from the market. So that's what Steyr did in mid-80s. Mid to late 80s, they stopped producing these altogether after about 20,000 had been made. The Army ones are especially rare in the United States. I think less than 1,000 of them ever actually made it over. The gun itself is, as you can probably tell, it's a double-action, single-action semi-auto. It's all metal. It's kind of hard to tell with this crinkle finish on it, but it is actually metal underneath there. I used to think it was plastic. Interestingly, the trigger guard is plastic, which I believe was done as a money-saving measure because these were getting pretty expensive to make, especially after the design and R&D and everything that went into them. So this is plastic. Apparently some of the military ones had a metal trigger guard. The gun's chambered in 9mm, and there are several things that are pretty innovative about the gun, really. I already mentioned the gas delayed action, which by the way is where the GB name comes from. It stands for Gasbremse, which in German means gas brake. That alone is pretty interesting. Also, the barrel is fixed, which you don't usually see in 9mm pistols. And just the capacity, 18 rounds at the time, was just a really high capacity handgun. Unfortunately, it never took off too much, like I said, because of the price, and also because when they were selling these in the early 80s, 9mm wasn't a big thing in the United States yet. And then they lost a couple government contract contests to Beretta, Glock, Sig Sauer, I think, did pretty well too. So people just weren't going to be buying these for the premium that they were charging. It's not a small gun by any means. I pulled out my Beretta as usual, give you a size comparison. It's about the same size, and as you know, the Beretta is not small. But the width, it's a little thinner than the Beretta, although I have some aftermarket wood on there. But you know, it's basically the size of the Beretta, which is to say it's a large gun. Doesn't weigh a whole lot though. It's about 34 ounces, same as the Beretta. Talk about the ergonomics and the features a little bit. Pretty straightforward for the most part. You have a mag release there. This is a slide release. This here is a decocker. So when you cock the gun, you pull that down and it's decocked. Everything else about it is pretty standard. The breakdown is a little bit interesting because the barrel is fixed. There's this bushing here that you have to unscrew. There are actually some really good videos on the breakdown procedure of this gun, so I'm not really going to get into that. If you have one of these, look on YouTube. There's a couple actually out there. I'll pop the mag out because the magazine is kind of interesting. If you see, it's a double stack, and it kind of feeds similar to like an AR magazine actually. You put one round in, you just feed them straight down, and they go back and forth like this. It's definitely a sturdy magazine. It's very robust and well made. And these magazines are ridiculously expensive. They go for about $300 or $400 a piece, believe it or not. So, fortunately, I got mine basically new in box. It came with 2 mags, but I'd hate to have to try to find one of these. If you ever find one of these being sold without a magazine, you're looking at another pretty hefty expense to find one. And ergonomically, I think the grips actually feel pretty good. The grips themselves are plastic. I'd love to be able to put some wood on there or something, but I guess the black plastic kind of goes with the look. It's kind of a bit funky and spacey, so it's all black. But anyway, the grips feel pretty good. They might be a little bit big for some people. I guess I'm a bad judge at that because a lot of the time big guns, like the Walther P18, apparently has really big grips, but it fits me great. I don't know. This one, though, it fits me pretty well, I think. Has a nice curve to it. Feels good in the hands. I'll show you the sight picture. It's got 3 dots, which are very easy to see. So the sights work out great. And shooting it is pretty pleasurable. A lot of people say that it's the softest shooting 9mm they've ever fired, and I don't really find that to be the case. It's pretty soft shooting, but you know, the gas delay in here, the gas brake, is supposed to soften the recoil, and you know, it probably feels softer than some guns, especially ones with the high bore axis, like, you know, an H&K or Sig or something, but it's not like a little pea shooter or it's shooting a 22 or anything like that. Trigger is pretty good for a service pistol. Do it in single action first. It's heavy, not gonna lie about that. It's got a little bit of take up, just a smidgen of creep, and then it goes. But it feels pretty good, especially compared to a lot of guns like the Beretta, for example. This trigger I don't really like at all. Double action is heavy, no doubt about that. But it's smooth. And like I said, this is a later version, one of the last ones made, that has the spur trigger, or the spur hammer. And that right there indicates that it's going to have a better trigger than some of the other ones with the rounded hammer. So if I were looking for one of these, I would probably keep an eye out for this sort of profile on the hammer, because it means you're going to get a later gun which was better made and has a little bit better trigger. So trigger's good, shooting is fun. It's pretty accurate. It's not my most accurate handgun, at least not in my hands. I honestly don't shoot it a whole lot though, so maybe that's part of it. But it does have a really high potential for accuracy with that fixed barrel, long sight radius. A lot of people say that they shoot it extremely accurately, and I believe it. I just don't really shoot it enough to say for sure. And I'm definitely not inaccurate with it, so I do enjoy shooting it when I bring it out. If I were going to level any criticisms about this gun, one would probably be just the gas delay system. It gets pretty dirty on the barrel. You can see I haven't cleaned it too well. But what happens is there's this little hole. If I were to take the gun apart, you could see it. There's a hole right there. So a lot of this carbon gunk gets sprayed out and it coats the barrel. So after shooting it for a while, you end up with a completely blackened barrel. And you need to clean it off to ensure reliable function, because if that gas thing gets clogged, which is what happened a lot in those old Rogak guns from the 70s, if that gets clogged, then the whole gas brake system doesn't work, and then you got a straight blowback gun, which is not fun to shoot. Another criticism is definitely going to be the expense of these magazines. Like I said, $300, maybe $250 if you get lucky. Not easy to find. When you do, they're ridiculously expensive. So are any other parts, really, and that's the other criticism of this gun, is that any kind of parts, accessories, stuff like that are going to be pretty expensive. There was a compensator also offered for the gun, which would screw onto the end of the barrel, or would somehow attach to the end. Those alone go for $400, $500, $600, something like that. So if you ever see one of those, you're looking at some money right there. And really, those are my main criticisms. Otherwise, the gun is really well made. I would put it probably about the same level as maybe the Walther P18 in terms of build quality. It's not, you know, upper echelon like a Sig P210 or something, but it's got a nice high polish, glossy slide. It's matte on top, but the side is polished nicely. Overall build quality and feel in the hand is great. It's very solidly made. Trigger's pretty good. You know, I like the gun a lot. They go for about, prices on these start at around $700 and go on up probably to $1,000, $1,100 or so if you're looking for one brand new in box. A little bit all over the place though, because there's not really a lot of collector interest in them necessarily, but They are kind of rare. They're well made, accurate, great shooters, you know. So people do want them, but you don't see really sky-high prices all the time. So usually you're looking at about $700 to $1,000, I'd say, to find one of these in good shape. And yeah, it's the Steyr GB. It's a really nice gun. Don't see a lot of them out there, and I didn't see any review videos on YouTube. There are a couple takedown videos, and thought I'd put my 2 cents out there about them. Mine's been totally reliable. Some people, I think, might have problems just because of that little gas hole getting clogged, but if you keep it clean, mine's been completely reliable with any ammo I've shot through it. Like I said, it's a good shooter. One guy I've talked to, he said that his this magazine lip here, it kind of, when it recoils, it bothers his pinky finger, and I could see that happening. I don't really have it happen with me, but that is something to maybe watch out for. But otherwise, you know, I'd recommend it if you're looking for something a little bit goofy. You have the money to spend on something a little bit out there, and you want something accurate, unique, kind of funky looking, which is probably part of the other reason that these didn't do so great, is just because they look a little bit strange. But yeah, so that's the Steyr GB. Show you that trigger one more time. And that's probably about 5 pounds, something like that. Not too bad. So yeah, thanks for watching.